This is the story of two $5,000 cashmere sweaters, Loro Piana versus Brunello Cucinelli. Same cashmere, same beige, same refusal to put a logo on anything. And right now, their stories could not be more different. One of them just spent a year under Italian court supervision for what investigators called the systematic exploitation of migrant workers in unlicensed Lombardy workshops near Milan. The other quietly built a village around its factory, donates 20% of profits to cultural causes, pays its workers above the European industrial average, and has never been named in a single labor investigation. They sell the same sweater for the same $5,000. They are not the same company. And the gap between them tells you everything about where luxury is going, who owns it, and what you're actually buying when you spend that kind of money. This is the quiet luxury showdown. The case for caring about this is simple. Quiet luxury, with no logos and no monograms, just fabric and tailoring, has been the dominant luxury aesthetic for most of the last 5 years. The wardrobe of HBO's Succession. The official uniform of finance, tech, and old money. The $5,000 cashmere sweater that nobody outside the room recognizes as a $5,000 sweater. That aesthetic is sold to you by a small handful of brands. Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli are the two most prominent, and they are routinely described in the same sentence by fashion magazines, by analysts, by the people who actually buy this stuff. Occasionally, that same sentence also includes Ermenegildo Zegna, the other major Italian house competing in this exact space. But Loro Piana and Cucinelli are the ones everyone means when they say quiet luxury. But they are not two versions of the same business. One is a French-owned subsidiary inside the world's largest luxury group, run by the founder's 30-year-old son, valued at 11 billion euros and optimized for margin. The other is still owned by the man who founded it in 1978, who took it public on the Milan Stock Exchange and then voluntarily capped his own profits at 10%. Same fabric, opposite models. And it turns out the difference matters. So how did Loro Piana end up here? The company was founded in 1924 in the Piedmont town of Corona by an engineer named Pietro Loro Piana. For most of the 20th century, it was a textile business, cashmere, vicuna, merino wool, supplying fabric to the luxury houses and not selling finished clothes under its own name. That changed in 2013 when LVMH, the French conglomerate controlled by Bernard Arnault, bought 80% of the company from the Loro Piana family. The deal was supposed to be the start of a controlled expansion. Keep the family running it, plug it into LVMH's distribution muscle, scale the brand globally. The other two conglomerates who could have made a similar move, Kering and Richemont, did not. It worked. Revenue is now estimated at around 2.5 to 2.7 billion euros a year. Loro Piana is the third largest fashion brand inside LVMH, behind only Louis Vuitton and Dior. It quietly surpassed Fendi, Celine, Givenchy, every other heritage label LVMH owns. In 2025, LVMH exercised a call option to buy another 9%. Its stake now sits at 94%. The price paid for that 9% slice was 1 billion euros. The implied valuation of the whole brand is 11 billion euros. That is roughly 4 times what LVMH paid for the original 80% 12 years earlier. And then, in May 2025, Bernard Arnault gave the chief executive officer job to his 30-year-old son. Frederic Arnault, fourth of 5 Arnault children, École Polytechnique graduate, and previously chief executive officer of LVMH watches, was moved into the top seat at Loro Piana. It was his first leadership role inside LVMH's fashion division. The previous chief executive officer was promoted to deputy of Louis Vuitton. The new role underscored a shift in family stewardship. This was the picture in May 2025. A 100-year-old Italian wool mill transformed into LVMH's third biggest engine, run by the heir apparent of the world's largest luxury empire. 2 months later, the Milan court issued its ruling. On July 14, 2025, the Milan tribunal placed Loro Piana under judicial administration. The court order ran 26 pages. The findings, when you read them, are not subtle. Loro Piana subcontracted the production of its garments, including the cashmere jackets that retail for $4,000 and $5,000, through 2 intermediary companies. Neither of those companies had any actual manufacturing capacity. They existed on paper. They were what the court called front firms. The real production happened in Chinese-owned workshops in Lombardy, in and around the Milan area, with some of them in the subcontracting corridors near Como. When Italian police inspected those workshops in 2024, they documented 13-hour workdays, makeshift dormitories where workers were sleeping inside the factory, no fire exits, and machinery the court described as hazardous. One worker reported his employer beating him so badly that the injuries required medical attention. The court's verdict on Loro Piana itself was the part that mattered. The Milan judges wrote that the company had culpably failed to oversee its suppliers, and that this failure was, in their words, in pursuit of higher profits. Loro Piana was not the only one. It was the 5th fashion company the same Milan court placed under administration in 2 years. Valentino, Dior, Armani, and the Italian handbag house Alviero Martini had all been hit before. The court explicitly noted in its ruling that this production model had continued to operate even after Italian fashion's industry body signed a public accord to fight worker exploitation just 2 months earlier. This is also the context in which the European Union Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, called the CSDDD, is being developed. That legislation would legally require companies like Loro Piana to conduct mandatory supply chain audits and face liability for exactly what the Milan court documented. The industry knows it is coming. The Milan rulings are, in part, a preview of what enforcement looks like before the directive is fully in force. Loro Piana stayed under court supervision for the full year. The administration was lifted in April 2026 after the company ran 2,400 supplier audits and terminated more than 100 suppliers. Here is the part that is easy to miss. The exploitation did not happen because Loro Piana hired bad people. It happened because the structure of the supply chain, multiple layers of subcontracting, deliberately obscured, with no one upstream legally responsible for what happened downstream, produced exactly the outcome you would expect. The scandal is not a bug in the LVMH operating model. It is the operating model, and it produced 4 billion euros of additional brand value in 12 years. Now, why does Brunello Cucinelli still own half of his own company? He still owns that stake by choice. Cucinelli was born in 1953 in Castelragone, a hilltop village in Umbria. His father was a farm laborer. There was no running water in the family farmhouse, no electricity, and 12 people lived under the same roof. He has told the story many times, most recently to the Financial Times last year, and the through line is always the same. He watched his father come home from the fields, exhausted and humiliated, and decided he would build a different kind of business if he ever got the chance. He got the chance in 1978. With 550 euros of starting capital, he founded a small cashmere knitwear company in Solomeo, his wife Frederica's hometown. He dyed his cashmere in bright colors. Nobody else was doing that. The brand took off. In 2012, 14 years after the menswear line launched, and with the company already global, Cucinelli took it public on the Milan Stock Exchange. He became a billionaire overnight, and then he did the thing that most Italian founders of his generation did not do. He did not sell to LVMH. He did not sell to Kering. He did not sell to Richemont. He kept the company. In 2014, he transferred his entire 61% personal stake into a trust for his two daughters, Camilla and Carolina. The trust still controls roughly half the company today. The remaining shares trade on Milan. Revenue in 2023 was 1.14 billion euros, up 24% from the year before. Brunello Cucinelli is profitable, founder-controlled, and growing faster than most of LVMH's portfolio. When the Financial Times asked him last year about the rest of the industry, he gave them this: "We're the only ones still making a 10% profit. Many other labels' net profits doubled, which means revenue went up multiple times. There's no magic trick. It only happens if you increase production and prices while also cutting costs. That is not a marketing line. That is an accusation." Is humanistic capitalism real? Or is it just better PR than Loro Piana's? Here is what is actually verifiable. Over the last 30 years, Cucinelli has spent a substantial portion of company resources restoring the village of Solomeo from the ground up. Not metaphorically. Literally, he bought the crumbling medieval hamlet, hired craftsmen, and rebuilt the streets, the buildings, the gardens. He commissioned a theater, an amphitheater, a library, a school of arts and crafts, a park, all paid for by the company. He donates 20% of the brand's annual profits to cultural causes through the Brunello and Frederic Cucinelli Foundation. That figure has been audited and disclosed in the company's filings since the initial public offering. Inside the factory, employees are paid above average compared with the European industrial average. There is a subsidized canteen serving lunch made from locally grown produce. The working day is enforced. There are no 13-hour shifts because the company actively prevents them. The factory and the workers live in the same village, within walking distance of each other. You can fly to Solomeo today and see it. The buildings are there. The canteen is there. The theater stages plays. When asked what underpins all of this, Cucinelli's answer has been consistent for years. He told the Financial Times that it is not fair to make a profit by underpaying workers and cutting costs. He said this years before the Milan court ruled on Loro Piana. And here is the part that closes the loop. The same Milan court that placed Loro Piana, Dior, Armani, Valentino, and Alviero Martini under administration has reviewed 5 of the biggest names in Italian luxury since 2023. Brunello Cucinelli has never been named in any of them. So, same aesthetic. Opposite ethics. Which model survives the next decade? Both of them are sitting on top of the same problem. The trend that built both companies, quiet luxury, the no-logo aesthetic, the succession wardrobe, is starting to crack. Bain & Company's 2025 luxury report shows global luxury spending fell from 1% to 3% year on year, the first contraction in over a decade. A YouGov survey published last year found that 57% of luxury buyers now prefer expressive, logo-forward pieces over understated ones. Generation Z, in particular, is rotating toward maximalism, the loud bags, the visible monograms, the streetwear collabs. Brands like Versace and Gucci are the obvious beneficiaries of that rotation. They are, by design, the anti-quiet luxury bet. LVMH's bet is structural. They moved Frederic Arnault into the chief executive officer seat at Loro Piana specifically because they believe the brand has another decade of growth in it, and that the right move is to optimize harder, scale faster, and ride out the trend cycle with sheer balance sheet leverage. The supply chain scandal was absorbed. The court administration was lifted in 12 months. The brand value went up to 11 billion euros. while the investigation was ongoing. The implicit theory is that the brand is bigger than its founders, bigger than its scandal, bigger than the trend that fed it. Strip the family, strip the supply chain. The equity still holds. Cucinelli's bet is the opposite. He is not stripping the family. He is the family. His 2 daughters are vice presidents. One son-in-law is co-chief executive officer. The other son-in-law works in menswear. All 4 of them live in Solomeo, walking distance from each other. The company is being handed down inside the village it was built around. The implicit theory is that the brand cannot be separated from the people running it. Take Cucinelli out of Solomeo, take Camilla and Carolina out of the boardroom, take the village out of the supply chain, and what is left is not worth 11 billion euros. It is not even worth 1. Both theories are currently right. Loro Piana's value quadrupled during its scandal. Cucinelli's revenue grew 24% under voluntary margin caps. The next decade will tell you which theory survives the trend reversal. When you spend $5,000 on a sweater, what are you actually paying for? If you take Loro Piana at face value, you're paying for the cashmere, for the fiber, for the dye, for the workmanship, for the heritage. Loro Piana would tell you the same story for its vicuna pieces, the Hercus goat cashmere, the CITES regulated Andean fiber that pushes a single sweater past $9,000. The rarest material in the world, they say. But the Milan court documented exactly what producing that look costs when no one is checking the receipts. 13-hour days, dormitories inside factories, a worker beaten by his employer, a $4,000 jacket assembled for $140. Loro Piana sells you the look without the story. That is, in fact, the entire LVMH thesis. That brand equity is a financial asset that survives whoever happens to be running it, and whatever happens to be happening underneath it. That theory has produced an 11 billion euro valuation. It is not wrong. Cucinelli sells you a story that the look is the proof of. That theory has produced a company that is smaller, slower, less profitable per shareholder, and which has never, in 50 years of operation, been investigated for anything resembling what Loro Piana was just placed under court administration for. Both companies will still be selling beige cashmere a year from now. The fabric will be indistinguishable. The price will be similar. And the people buying it will mostly not know, or will know and choose not to think about, which model their money is funding. That is the actual quiet luxury showdown, not the aesthetic, the economics underneath it. We have now covered the $4,000 Loro Piana jacket made for $140. We have covered why Brunello Cucinelli should have failed by now and did not. And we have covered the gap between them. If you want the next one, hit subscribe.